universities in our country. This is an achievement worthy of the Catholic Church's work, and I believe it mirrors Jesus' own preference for the poor, that his work be carried forward in our work. And this, too, is a primary purpose and a reason that a church would establish and run universities. 6. When I was president of DePaul University in Chicago, my faculty helped with the establishment of the World Court. We taught the lawyers how to do the law in the World Court. We taught their judges. We helped them develop the law. This is the work of faculty. Our faculty do more than teach students. We assemble the world's experts, and then we encourage them to support and contribute their expertise to the world's largest challenges. They address issues of social neglect and inequality. They take up the standard for advancing the role and the rights of women, care for immigrants, access to the poor and other marginalized groups. They work on climate and public health and technology and psychosocial wellness and economic justice and peacemaking and the ideas of human purpose and meaning, research, and service to the world for the church and for the world are a key activity of our work, in addition to teaching students. Ex Corde Ecclesiae acknowledges this within the document, but in a very specific way. It encourages us to take our deepest faith convictions and bring them to bear in that work. But what also must be acknowledged is the work of helping the world with experts is our work. It is a contribution to the world. It is contributing to the world's fullness and well-being. And that, too, is a reason that we create universities for the world. 7, and last, and the most important, I think. Ex Corde Ecclesiae could be more Christocentric than it presently is in one very important way, by making clear that all of us who participate in this ministry of the church, we continue the teaching ministry of Jesus Christ. That is our work. We continue the teaching ministry of Jesus Christ. Now, the name of Jesus appears 3 times in Ex Corde, one of them in the footnotes. Jesus spent more time on teaching than any other activity in his lifetime. And while that teaching was not higher education as we know it today, it was the act of spreading ideas to the world that were both salvific and would enable the human community to flourish. The vocation of a teacher can be deeply rooted in the life and work of Jesus Christ. And this Constitution, this foundational document, could assist everyone that we work with to connect their work with the teaching ministry of Jesus Christ. I'll stop there. There are only 7 possible ideas. This is a wonderful document. Pope St. John Paul gave us a gift in creating this Constitution. And I believe in time we can strengthen that gift. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we looked at the future. Let's look at the strength of Ex Corde.
Thank you. Thank you. It's work?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, President, for your introduction. Allow me first of all, to thank the President of the FIUC-IFCU and the General Secretary for the invitation to speak this morning about the Constitution, Apostolic Constitution Ex Corde Ecclesiae. I saw it promulgated. It was a reference point for the activity of the university of which I was rector in Paris. Along with, let's not forget, the Constitution that was revised a few years ago, Sapientia Christiana, which became Veritatis Gaudium. And when I was rector, these two constitutions were complementary for our university. The first was addressed directly to the ecclesiastical faculties of theology, philosophy, canon law, and social sciences. The other was aimed at what in France we call grandes écoles, and in other countries we call that faculties of engineering, hard sciences, or business. On the one hand, the rector had a set of faculties regulated directly by the Catholic Church under the jurisdiction of the congregation, now the Dicastery of Education, and on the other, a text that gave greater autonomy in relation to the Holy See, recognizing that the university had to refer its action, in fact, because of the very purpose of teaching and research, to the cultural, social, political, and legal context in which the university existed. This explains the place given by the Constitution to concrete application, which, as the previous speaker mentioned, take account of the local conditions in which the university operates. Consequently, Ex Corde Ecclesiae contains, and it should be understood, the constitutive elements of what a Catholic university is. Constitution, constitutive, constitutional, the same word. Ex Corde Ecclesiae is necessary for Veritatis Gaudium because it describes what a Catholic university is, from which ecclesiastical faculties, above all in Rome, dedicated to the study of sacred sciences, must draw inspiration to understand their activity. It's with this in mind that I reread Ex Corde Ecclesiae, and I'd like to highlight three elements, among others, that we won't have time to go into. We haven't. They make up the institutional category of Catholic university, in which, despite the passage of time, Ex Corde Ecclesiae is 34 years old, are invaluable in understanding who we are and what we do. As a first point, I'd like to say that the concept of community is a guiding idea, arguably the most fundamental of this document. It takes it from the very experience of the university as such. The document does not say that the university was born of the church, but that it was born from the heart of the church, which saw in it a place where it could participate, let's say, obliged to, and I quote from the Constitution, this culture of creativity and the spread of knowledge for the good of humanity. This is why, at the same time, the Constitution describes the Catholic University as a gathering of intellectuals who, with those entrusted to them, form a community of teachers and students, and places the Catholic University within the university movement to which it belongs and to which it contributes. The Constitution takes us back to the origins of the university. It is the university of the Middle Ages, from which it draws its most constitutive element, the sense of belonging to a human community, a community of destiny shared by all, in which some have a particular duty. This is the duty given to this particular community of magistrorum and scholarium, who receive by right the status of corporation to act, to exercise the duty to devote themselves, and I quote again from the Constitution, to research, to teaching, to the training of students, freely gathered around the master in the same love of knowledge. Nothing is more constant in the history of the Catholic University. Right from the introduction and echoing this element in the text throughout, the Constitution does not isolate the Catholic University from the university as such. It's more than that. It prevents universities from isolating themselves from a whole to which they belong. They are part of the movement with which society are equipping themselves because of the need to have, for its growth, centers of teaching and research which, using instruments of the sort they are their own, contribute to the good of human society. This document is invaluable and on this point has not aged, for the expression Catholic University gives our institutions the qualification of university, to which it adds a qualifier. The university is first and foremost a university. So in understanding and promoting its identity, it will refer to the institution whose mission it must carry out. And it is at the same time Catholic, for it is the Church that has recognized it as the institutional reflection of what it is and does in the world and for humanity. The Catholic University is ex corde ecclesiae because it is a part of the Church's contribution to the good of humanity. Secondly, I'd like to say that these two aspects together make it an inspired community. Indeed, the document, which certainly hasn't aged, links Christian inspiration to the community itself. It is the university community that has a Catholic identity, allowing non-Catholics to contribute to its work. As a community, it manifests that in the world of university, it carries out the tasks of teaching and research with the referent constituted by Christian revelation. i.e., a transcendental conception of man, a vision of the world and of history with a meaning given in scriptures and lived through the unique experience of Christ. And a body of writings of a social and ethical nature, the consequence of the divine perspective with which it approaches a great question that concerns human life. The affirmation of ex corde ecclesiae has concrete implication for the way Catholic universities appear in the academic world. This implication concerns their identity as institution. Identity is both the result of a movement to bring people together whose will is necessarily called upon to contribute to a purpose that it expresses concretely, and of an authentication, so that it is publicly declared that the purpose, if it comes in part from people, is a specific realization of a mission that exists as an otherness before it, alterity before it. That is important, which is given to it, which they have a duty to translate into action, into criteria for participation, and finally, into statutory elements. This is why it is important that the document links the notion of institutional autonomy with that of responsibility, to highlight the fact that the qualification of Catholic is not an application, let me say infantile, of an external model, but the search for a practical truth of action confronted with the living heritage that the Catholic Church represents. A final point. The document indicates a third use of the term community applied to the Catholic University. If in the first place, the Catholic University is a community that exists as a Catholic in the universities, if in the second place, it's a community inspired by the ecclesial heritage, it is also a community that is already living what it proposes and what inspires it. In its relationships and in the implementation of university life, in its actions, in its relations with other universities, therefore within the national and international academic community, in society, the community must realize the mode and the principles that inspire it. This is not the only part of the document that deals with university pastoral care. Throughout the text, we sense a message of universality of relationships, which ties in with what we said earlier. In this text, being Catholic is not a criterion of isolation or separation or brutal demarcation, but of relationships, just as the Catholic Church itself, it's a community that is already living what it proclaims. In this respect, since it is so close, we can evoke the message of Pope Francis in his apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, which wants the Church to be fraternal in its relations with people in community. The Catholic University community has a duty of fraternity and therefore of universality. In the first speech, we talk about the poor and excluded in society. The apostolic exhortation speaks of those left by the wayside. This duty requires, as an implication of the Catholic qualifier, the decompartmentalization of the spirit, the rejection of excessive elitism, the welcoming of the different brother, relations with other universities less endowed financially and socially. The list would go on, describing action that would be the manifestation of the realization of what the church is in the profound identity, the identity expressed in the Second Vatican Council, a community that prefigures the world gathered in the unity of Christ.
Thank you. Thank you, Monsignor Beltrini, for reminding us of those three principles: community, inspired community, and relationships. I think I have a question for later that will bring the two of you together, but without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Sofia Opatska for her remarks. Thank you.
I know it's a round table, but I don't see part of the audience behind the computer, so I decided to change a little bit the scenery. So it's in order to address today such a prominent audience, because I will be speaking in the name of many Ukrainians. First of all, my colleagues and my students from Ukrainian Catholic University, and I would like to focus on the second part of the name of the panel, Challenges of the 21st Century. And they are very specific for my country and for the only Catholic university in Ukraine, which I represent. And I still believe, since we live in the common world, for sure they relate to you, they are brothers and sisters, and they relate to our church. So I will talk about three things: about context, about integral human development, and possible mechanism of solidarity within Federation. For almost 2 years, 694 days to be precise, my country has been burning in war. What is this war about? One may read the Russo-Ukraine war differently. Politicians may see it as a rivalry for the new global order, or clash of civilizations. Political science scholars would see it as a national liberation war for Ukraine's independence and sovereignty. Philosophically minded people may read it as a clash of values and political aspirations based on those values, and conflict between European and post-Soviet identities, between democracy and autocracy. In the lived experience of Ukrainians, it is a fight for our freedom and dignity. The current conflict is not about language or religion, but about radically different political visions of the relationship between those who rule and those who are ruled. So what is ultimately at stake in this war is the liberty of 40 million people and the vitality of the democratic world order. Ukrainians are demonstrating that a democracy can defend itself. As we know, dignity is about the unique value and preciousness of each person. This is about the inadmissibility of reducing a person only to means of satisfying ambitions and needs of the state ideology to the needs of the state ideology or nation. It is also about confidence in the human person's ability not to succumb to the temptations by power, money, and passions. It is a belief in person's ability to be guided by solidarity and compassion, to care for common good, to rejoice in the achievements of others, to build non-consumer relations with other people. Ukraine today is living through an exceptional time. Today we say with pride that we trust in armed forces of Ukraine. We believe in the victory of our defenders over the invader. We believe in preserving independence and renewal of Ukraine's territorial integrity. But our faith in victory after the victory is a challenge. War leaves more than one scar on the body of our country and in the souls of our people. Ukrainians will live on the great divide between democracy and autocracy for another decade or more. And in other words, we should find a way to learn how to creatively combine the values of resilience and democracy, as well as security and development. Let me make it very clear. We Ukrainians live in the alarming reality of genocide. If you learn history well, you will discover that whenever Russia occupied any land with the Ukrainian Eastern Catholic population, It led to the destruction of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, its institution, and its faithful. If Russia succeeded in the occupation of Ukraine, the Ukrainian Catholic University would cease to exist. And I would not be standing here among you, but rather be raped, imprisoned, or destroyed. We should learn from the lessons of the past. By famous Yale historian Timothy Snyder included Ukraine in what he called the bloodlands, calling the most dangerous territory of the whole planet for the human person to live in the 20th century. During that time, actually during just 10 years in 20th century, residents of Ukraine experienced a terrifying list of catastrophes: the Holodomor, Holocaust, starvation of imprisoned soldiers in the Soviet army, the Volyn tragedy, the deportation of Crimean Tatars, the Operation Wisla, and the other atrocities before, during, and after World War II. It was an unmatched experience of pervasive evil, intense hatred, dehumanization of people, and radical depreciation of human life. So Ukrainians have learned the lesson of the 20th century well. Our own statehood, however immature it might be, is the only protection against mass physical elimination of Ukrainians, against the annihilation of Ukrainian soul, language, and culture. The rise of authoritarian regimes which disregard human dignity and normalize violence, domination and humiliation as methods of both domestic governance and conduct in international affairs is a scary process, and it is important not to normalize it. What if country with nuclear power driven by conspiracy theory about the world's intention to destroy it and by weaponizing the resentment of its people against other countries decides to show sheer contempt to all international agreements and invaded its neighbor, which declined its nuclear weapons as we Ukrainians did? What if such a country decides to break all the rules of conducting the war and turns it into a war against civilian population and civilian infrastructure? What if it shows genocidal intent and engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocidal practices? We hope that the world, with the help of fighting Ukrainians, started to realize what kind of evil Putin's regime represents. The Russian war is not about resources. Russia has a lot of them. It is not for capturing the cities. These are almost fully destroyed. People in the world must understand that neither NATO nor any other external circumstances created an aggressive and criminal Russia. Evil can simply arise in certain societies and find its way into the hearts and minds of people. Such evil will not become good if we try to pacify it through appeasement, negotiations, and market transactions. It is important to realize that rational arguments may not work when you are faced with such evil and the only resources you have is to fight to eventually stop the bully by force. Unfortunately, we can also observe the anthropological crisis in West and comfort as the highest value. Let me quote a Ukrainian Nobel Prize winner, Alexandra Matviichuk. The problem today is not only that the space of freedom in authoritarian countries has narrowed to the level of prison cell. The problem is that even in mature democracies, the principles of Universal Declaration of Human Rights are being questioned. The generations that survived World War II were replaced by others. They inherited the values of democracy from their parents and began to take rights and freedom for granted. People increasingly manifest themselves not as bearers of their values, but as their consumers. And therefore, they are ready to exchange freedom for economic benefits, promises of security, or personal comfort. But freedom and human rights are not chosen once and for all. We make our own choices every day. Putin's conviction about decadence of West and its inability to transcend the comfort and consumerism attachment was one of the incentives for him to invade Ukraine, with the hope of impunity. He put his take on the moral disarmament of democratic West and its inability to unite and endure pain in the face of Putin's blackmailing, disruption, and weaponizing of everything, including religion. The Ukrainian experience should become a source of hope for the world, to give it back faith and absolute value, heal it from cynicism and excessive attachment to comfort. True values become visible not when everything is good and life is easy for us, but when things become difficult for us. Values guide us and determine our behavior when life turns its dark side to us. Ukraine is teaching the West that safety cannot be an end in itself, that it should not sacrifice values for the sake of safety, and that democracy deserves to be defended at the cost of one's comfort, health, and even life. War can differ from each other by many factors, but the war is always about situation when violence breaks into human life and dramatically exposes its fragility. To pose a question about integral human development during the war might look weird. It looks like an attempt to square the circle. To talk about IHD is to envisage a society built around prioritizing human dignity and its founding principles, policies, laws, and institutions. And war is about survival. However, we also could talk about IHD as an invitation to build dignity-centered, dignity-sensitive, and dignity-affirmative culture, which looks for enacting human dignity wherever possible. This holds true both for peace and conflict-defined situations. To protect and enhance human dignity of war victims, how to save and defend civilians, how to alleviate suffering of most vulnerable people affected by war. First, it is important to maintain order and not to allow for the collapse of destruction of the state. So IHD requires preserving order and sense of basic normality. Amid a full-scale invasion, we see remarkable things in Ukraine. The banking sector is well and alive. Trains are running according to the schedule. Business is busy, and schools and universities like us are teaching. The experience of war is overwhelming. It is bigger than anyone could possibly process on his or her own. When the full-scale war broke out, students of UKU were shocked and lost. Some were terrified and cried. Too much chaos in human life is unbearable. So it was very important to bring back a sense of order over their lives as soon as possible. Yes, you cannot stop the war, but you can contribute to the victory. You can work so that each day brings a victory one day closer. Designing and keeping a daily schedule becomes a way of regaining some agency. Recently, one graduate of our executive MBA program shared with me that the role of Ukrainian business now is to help people keep being busy and productive, have a routine of going every day to work, be with other people, and doing something that matters. Our students engaged in various volunteer activities, from humanitarian relief provision for internally displaced people to tracking the damage of cultural heritage to fighting Russia's disinformation war. We also transformed our curriculum to make it more meaningful and relevant to the current challenges. Practicing service learning enabled our whole community to keep the learning process to feel useful, plus get more order into our minds. Putin does not believe in people's agency. Being an authoritarian leader, he believes that ordinary people are manipulated into action and are not subjects to their own agency. Ukraine proves him wrong. We could say that the whole nation rose united in solidarity for defending the country. There is a clear sense of ownership of the country among Ukrainians. The volunteer movement is spectacular. People crowdfunding resources for everything: food, clothes, tactical medicine, defense equipment. The Ukrainian armed forces care about lives of their soldiers. We witness high morale, training versus cannon fodder approach, subsidiarity principle, celebrating the return of soldiers from captivity. Ukrainian churches, Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant serve soldiers through the ministry of their chaplains, who accompany combats in the front line. And we as universities see our role by the recently opened Veterans Office, certificate programs for chaplains, opening medical center. The same is true about the way Ukrainian dead soldiers are treated. When their bodies are transported from villages and towns, people in the street pay public honor to their selfless service by kneeling. It turns out that death also could be lived with dignity. Any war is a defeat of inhumanity. Any war is a trial when it comes to protecting human dignity. But even in the context of military conflict, of scale like Ukraine, the search of human dignity is not a mission impossible. There are many actors who could teach us to affirm human dignity even under such adverse circumstances, even such difficult and costly. The last but not least, I would like to make suggestions about culture and mechanism of solidarity among Catholic universities. Catholic universities for centuries played an important role, and together we create a strong movement which can help those in need to survive and to fulfill mission in the adversary circumstances. I would like to offer a number of suggestions to Federation from our both challenging but also in some way positive experience. First, together we can develop a model of speedy reaction in case of emergency, communication, first aid, information sharing. Second, facilitate normal educational experience. Those initiatives that could help students and scholars affected by war get a full-fledged educational experience without major disruption. Third, help to establish social outreach programs for international students and faculty. The best way to demonstrate solidarity with a university in emergency is to come to this university for a short outreach program. 4, as a Catholic university, we need to rediscover the topic of just peace, just war in the context of Catholic social teaching and security studies. In time of hybrid war and hybrid threat, we witness a gap in Catholic social teaching on this matter. 5, help to reduce the risk of brain drain, to establish a similar program like Scholars at Risk for faculty from Catholic universities affected by the war and other emergencies. 6, help to fix Russian studies. Some universities, some Catholic universities, we have Russian studies. People whose home in a world of critical reflection must be in the forefront of doing justice to the darkness in the heart of Europe. Russia's threat to Ukraine and to the world will be imminent in long term unless Russian people reckon with and atone for its imperial and communist past. Lasting peace requires a spiritual feat. We can only hope that Russian people will be able to revisit its disposition for colonialism and repent for the sins committed by Russian and Soviet empire. Putin regime cannot disappear like bad weather by itself. For it to disappear and for Russia to have at least a chance for civilization, some must renounce Russia's imperial heritage and make a moral examination of consciousness on behalf of the entire nation. I believe this is a task not only for Russia, but for global academia as well. 7, help to develop Ukrainian studies. One should also ask what place studying Ukraine should be allotted in Eastern European studies. Could Catholic universities play a leadership role in shaping the narrative and deepening knowledge about Ukraine, going beyond the headlines and providing a platform for original Ukrainian voice? B, the universities are, if I may say, in a generational business, meaning we create the most lasting and cross-generational impact, perhaps the most important and transformative impact when it comes to human personalities, human lives, social and community lives. One thing which we can't allow ourselves to fail at communicating and educating is this: a free society is a moral achievement which cannot be achieved once and for all and forever. It requires everyone's effort and commitment. It's a kind of moral victory which is expected of everyone and all of us all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. I know I've been given a hard stop at 1:15, but we had to listen to this in its entirety for its importance. If you have a question in French or Spanish, we have translator, but I'd like to ask one question very quickly to the two panelists next to me. You talked about, an idea of a new ex-corde. You talked about the importance, if we wanted to change ex-corde, if we wanted to activate change that can help situations like the ones that Sophia also elaborated for us. How do we do it? I mean, is it even possible? Who needs to come around the table and implement those changes to a document that is as eternal as ex-corde? So I'm going to...
Well, I think you began your comments noting that Veritatis Gaudium had a predecessing document, and that documents are reconfigured from time to time, and that can happen. So it ordinarily would happen because the office that watches over this, the dicastery in this case, might consider it an important moment for that. I don't know the timing of it. I do know that it's useful in those moments that we bring groups like this together to think together about it, if it were to happen, that this should be a broadly consultative process if it were to happen.
To change the document, yes, my opinion is my opinion is that it's certainly not necessary to change the whole constitution, because I express that it contains the constitutional elements. It's better to identify the new problems facing Catholic universities and see whether they can be addressed in less formal ways. Reading the ex-corde Ecclesiae, I was very surprised how the document is very topical, because it contains the more important elements of the Catholic university. The second point is it's impossible to apply in every culture, in every nation. It's better to search how to apply the Constitution in every country than to change a Constitution. Sapientia Cassiana is different because they changed the introduction. And in the introduction of Sapientia Christiana, we find the mentality of Francis. And when we read the introduction, you recognize the meanings of Francis, Evangelii Gaudium. For ex-corde Ecclesia is different, because I think the circumstances in which we work today have changed. But I don't think that ex-corde has changed. And it's not useful to change the text to change the circumstances. It's a contrary. I give an advice to the dicastery.
Thank you so much. So local adaptation. Any questions from the audience? And I'm going to accept only one at this point because we have a 1:15. It's time to eat. So, buon appetito, we say in Italian.
So, dear participants, just a reminder for the afternoon session. May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention? For the afternoon session, we will meet at the Sala Jubileo. The Sala Jubileo is just in front where we have the coffee break. Por la tarde nos encontramos al frente de la sala donde teníamos el coffee break, que se llama la Sala de Jubileo. Y la tarde se va a pasar allá y el día de mañana también. A las 2:30.